The air at Dust Haven smelled like burnt fuel and broken promises. Tarek pulled his collar up against the evening wind as he walked the cracked pavement between the trading post warehouses. Another cargo run finished, another day of flying through the emptiness between worlds. His boots echoed in the quiet as most of the port workers had already retreated to the cantinas for the night. He'd been doing this for 6 years now, ever since the accident that took his wife and daughter. Flying cargo was safe, predictable, lonely. Exactly what he needed. No attachments, no pain, just the hum of engines and the silence of Space Dot as he rounded the corner past the main cantina. He heard it, a small broken sound that made him stop, crying. Tarek's first instinct was to keep walking. Dust Haven attracted all sorts of misery, and getting involved meant complications. But something in that sound, something young and utterly hopeless, made his feet refuse to move forward. Dot in the shadow between two storage units, illuminated only by the flickering orange glow of a dying street lamp, sat a small figure. At first, Tarek thought it might be a human child, but as he approached slowly, he saw the telltale signs of a Celestian skin that held a faint pearlescent quality, and along her arms and neck, delicate patterns that looked like they'd been painted with light itself. She was small, maybe 8 or 9 in human years, though Celestian aging was different. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves around a tear-streaked face. Her clothing was torn and dirty, far too thin for the cooling desert night. When she looked up at him, her eyes were an unusual shade of violet blue, swimming with tears and something deeper, a profound loneliness that Tarek recognized because he'd seen it in his own mirror every day for 6 years. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse as if she'd been crying for hours. "Please, I'll be good. I won't cause trouble. Just don't leave me here." Tarek's throat tightened. He crouched down slowly, keeping some distance so he wouldn't frighten her more. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "Nissa," she said quietly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. The movement caused the luminescent patterns on her skin to pulse briefly, casting soft blue light across her features. "Where's your family, Nissa?" Her face crumpled again. "My stepmother brought me here 3 days ago. She said I was defective. She said I eat too much and cost too much, and she doesn't want me anymore. She left me with 20 credits and said to find my own way." Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "But no one wants a defective Celestian child. I asked at every ship, every stall. They all said no." Tarek felt something twist painfully in his chest. The casual cruelty of it made his jaw clench. "What makes you defective?" Nissa pulled her sleeve up higher, revealing more of the glowing patterns. "These marks. They're too bright, too active. Other Celestian children only get faint traces. Mine pulse and glow. My stepmother said it made me freakish. She said no respectable family would want me, that I'd never find a proper match. She said I was just a burden from my real father's foolish choices." "Your real father?" "He died 2 years ago. Accident in the processing plants, they said. But—" she hesitated, looking down. "But I don't think it was an accident. I heard my stepmother talking after. She married someone new very quickly. He didn't want me around." Tarek studied the girl. She was malnourished, exhausted, and clearly terrified. Every instinct he'd buried for 6 years suddenly screamed at him. This was how it started. Caring led to attachment. Attachment led to loss. And loss led to the kind of pain that never fully healed. But looking at her small frame shaking in the cold, at the desperate hope dying in her eyes as she waited for him to leave like everyone else had, he found he couldn't stand up and walk away. "When did you last eat?" he asked instead. Nissa's eyes widened slightly. "Yesterday morning. A merchant gave me half a bread roll." Tarek made a decision he knew would complicate everything. "Come with me." He stood and offered his hand. Nissa stared at it like it might vanish if she reached for it. Then, slowly, she placed her small, cold hand in his. Her fingers were so thin he could feel every bone. They walked together toward the small cluster of food stalls, still open near the transport terminals. Tarek was aware of the weight of her hand in his, the way she stayed close to his side, the occasional glances she gave him as if checking he was still real Dot at a small Terran-style diner. Tarek ordered soup, bread, and protein cubes. When the food arrived, Nissa didn't move until he pushed the plate toward her. "Go ahead." She ate like someone who expected the food to be snatched away at any moment. Quick, desperate bites, barely chewing. Tarek had to stop her twice to make her slow down before she choked. As she ate, he noticed spacers at other tables, glancing over, some with pity, others with cold calculation. That calculation worried him. "Nissa," he said quietly, "do you know why your marks glow like that?" She shook her head, mouth full of bread. After swallowing, she said, "My real father told me never to let anyone see them clearly. He said they were special, that they were my birthright. But he died before he could explain what that meant." Tarek felt unease creep up his spine. Birthright, special, those words meant value. And value meant danger in a place like Dust Haven Dot, as if summoning his fears into reality. The diner door opened, and 3 figures entered. 2 were human. One was a Krell wearing the mismatched armor of bounty hunters. Their eyes scanned the room systematically until they landed on Nissa, the lead hunter, a scarred human named Cross, whom Tarek recognized from previous port encounters, smiled coldly. He approached their table, his hand resting casually on the plasma pistol at his hip. "Well now," Cross said, his voice carrying across the quiet diner. "Been looking for a little Celestian girl with special marks." Ornisa went rigid beside Tarek, her hand dropping the spoon with a clatter. "No," she whispered, shrinking back. "Please, no." Tarek's body moved before his mind fully decided. He stood, placing himself between Cross and the girl. "She's with me." Cross's smile didn't waver, but his eyes turned hard. "You got papers saying she's yours?" "I don't need papers." "She asked for help. I'm giving it." "That's not a crime." "Interfering with family matters is, though," Cross countered. "Her stepmother has legal guardianship. She wants the girl back. You're just some cargo pilot who's about to make a very stupid mistake." Tarek felt Nissa's hand grip the back of his jacket. She was shaking badly now. He thought about his ship, about his quiet, uncomplicated life, about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then he thought about his daughter, about how small and scared she'd been in those final moments before the station decompression, about how he'd failed to protect her. "The girl stays with me," Tarek said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Walk away, Cross." The bounty hunter's hand moved toward his weapon. The diner went silent, other patrons hastily gathering their things and leaving. The Krell behind Cross cracked his knuckles, anticipating violence. "Last chance, pilot." Cross warned. Tarek's response was to reach down, scoop Nissa up into his arms, and bolt for the back exit. He heard shouts behind him, the sound of chairs crashing, boots pounding. Nissa buried her face in his shoulder, her thin arms locked around his neck. Tarek ran through the back alleys of Dust Haven, his heart hammering, the girl's weight almost nothing in his arms. His ship, the Wandering Star, was docked in Bay 17. If he could reach it, he could get them out. But as he rounded a corner, 2 more hunters appeared ahead, blocking his path. Behind him, he heard Cross and his crew closing in. Trap.Tarek set Nissa down, keeping her behind him. His mind raced through options, finding none that ended well. The hunters advanced from both sides, weapons drawn now, Then Nissa did something unexpected. She stepped out from behind him and raised her arms. The patterns on her skin blazed suddenly with brilliant blue-white light, so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. The light pulsed outward in a wave that sent the nearest hunters stumbling backward. In that moment of confusion, Tarek grabbed Nissa's hand and ran for a side passage he knew led to the maintenance tunnels beneath the port. They disappeared into the darkness below as shouts of anger and confusion echoed behind them. In the tunnels, breathing hard, Tarek looked at the girl whose hand he still held. Her marks were still glowing faintly, illuminating their path. "What was that?" he asked. "I don't know," Nissa said, her voice small and frightened. "It happens sometimes when I'm scared. My father said never to let anyone see, but I thought they'd hurt you." Tarek realized then that this girl wasn't just abandoned. She was valuable in ways he didn't understand, and he just made himself an enemy of whoever wanted her. But looking at her frightened face, at the trust she'd somehow placed in a stranger, he knew he'd made his choice the moment he'd crouched down beside her in that alley. There's a reward for her return to her stepmother. Quite generous, actually. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get to my ship. We'll figure out the rest from there. Where will we go?" Nissa asked as they moved through the tunnels. Tarek squeezed her hand. "Somewhere safe. I promise." It was the first promise he'd made to anyone in 6 years. And as they climbed toward Bay 17, with hunters searching for them above, and an unknown danger attached to this child, Tarek wondered if it was a promise he could actually keep. But when Nissa looked up at him and whispered, "Thank you, Papa," his heart made the decision his head couldn't. He would keep that promise. Or die trying. The wandering star wasn't much to look at. An aging cargo hauler with patched hull plating and engines that rattled more than they should. But she was fast when she needed to be, and right now Tarek needed speed more than anything else. He guided Nissa up the loading ramp, constantly checking over his shoulder for pursuit. The maintenance tunnels had bought them time, but not much. Cross would have the entire port on alert within the hour. Inside, the ship's interior was sparse but clean. A small cargo hold, a cramped cockpit, and living quarters barely large enough for one person. Nissa stood in the narrow corridor, looking around with wide eyes, her luminescent marks still glowing faintly in the dim light. "Sit there," Tarek said, pointing to the co-pilot's seat as he moved to the controls. His hands flew across the console, running through pre-flight checks faster than he ever had before. "Strap in tight." Nissa climbed into the seat that was far too large for her, fumbling with the harness. Tarek reached over and secured it properly, trying not to notice how fragile she seemed, how her hands still trembled. The CUM system crackled to life. "Cargo vessel Wandering Star, this is Dusthaven Port Authority. You do not have clearance for departure. Power down your engines immediately." Tarek ignored the transmission and fired up the main thrusters. The ship groaned and shuddered, then lifted from the dock with a metallic screech. Warning lights flashed across his console. He was breaking about a dozen regulations, and port security would fine him heavily if they caught him. But as he angled the ship toward the sky and pushed the throttles forward, he saw 3 figures running across the landing platform below. Cross and his crew, weapons drawn. Too late to stop them. The Wandering Star punched through Dusthaven's thin atmosphere and into the black of space. Tarek didn't relax until they'd made the jump to hyperspace, the stars stretching into lines around them before settling into the familiar swirling tunnel of faster-than-light travel. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. Nissa was staring out the viewport, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. The fear was still there in her eyes, but now mixed with something else. Wonder. "I've never been off-world before," she said quietly. My father always said he'd take me to see the core system someday. But then he died, and my stepmother said travel was too expensive for someone like me. Tarek unbuckled his harness and moved to the small galley area behind the cockpit. Someone like you? Defective. Nissa repeated the word her stepmother had used, and it made Tarek's jaw clench. Wrong. Unmarriageable. A burden. You're not defective, Tarek said firmly, pulling out the limited food supplies he kept aboard. You're a child, and whoever told you otherwise was cruel and wrong. He heated up some ration packs, not fancy, but nutritious, and brought them back to where Nissa sat. She took the warm container hesitantly, as if still expecting it to be taken away. Eat slowly this time, Tarek said, settling into the pilot's seat. We're safe for now. No one's going to take it. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the steady hum of the ship's engines. Tarek watched her from the corner of his eye, noting the way she kept touching her glowing marks, as if checking they were still there. Your father, he said finally. What was his name? Demon, Nissa said, and her voice carried a weight of grief that seemed too heavy for someone so young. He worked in the mineral processing plants on Cathura. He was kind. He used to sing to me every night before sleep. Old Celestian songs about stars and homecomings. And your stepmother? Nissa's expression darkened. Velora. She married my father a year before he died. I thought she liked me at first. She'd smile and bring me sweets. But after father died, she trailed off, staring at her half-eaten food. She changed. Or maybe she just stopped pretending. She married again, within 6 months, a merchant named Torvak. He said I reminded him of his failures, whatever that meant. Velora started saying I was cursed, that my marks were a sign of contamination in the bloodline. Tarek frowned. But that's not true. Celestian marks are genetic indicators, aren't they? They show lineage. That's what my father said. Nissa pulled her sleeve up, revealing more of the intricate patterns. In the ship's low light, they pulsed gently, like living things. He told me these marks were special, that they came from his father and his father's father, going back generations. He said they were a map. A map to what? He never told me. He said I'd understand when I was older, when the marks fully awakened. She looked up at Tarek with those striking violet-blue eyes. But Velora knew something. I heard her talking with Torvak one night. She said my father had hidden something, some great inheritance, and that these marks were the key. She said if she could unlock them, she'd be wealthy beyond measure. Tarek's unease from earlier returned, stronger now. This wasn't just about a cruel stepmother wanting to be rid of a troublesome child. This was about greed, about something valuable enough to hire bounty hunters. Is that why she abandoned you? He asked. To force the marks to activate? Nissa shrugged helplessly. I don't know. Maybe she thought stress or danger would trigger them. Or maybe, her voice dropped to a whisper, maybe she was planning to have me killed and then cut the marks from my body. The casual way she said it, as if discussing the weather, broke something in Tarek's chest. What kind of life had this child lived, that she could speak of her own potential murder so calmly? That's not going to happen, he said firmly. I won't let it, but why? Nissa asked, and the genuine confusion in her voice was heartbreaking. You don't know me. I'm just some strange alien child. Why would you risk yourself for me? Tarek was quiet for a long moment, staring at the swirling hyperspace outside the viewport. Because 6 years ago, I had a daughter. Her name was Mira. She was 7 years old, and she loved to draw pictures of planets she'd never seen. His voice was rough with old pain. There was an accident at the station where we lived. A decompression in the residential sector. My wife and daughter were inside. I was on a supply run. By the time I got back, he didn't need to finish. Nissa's small hand reached out and touched his arm gently, a gesture of comfort that seemed too mature for her age. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "After that, I ran. I took jobs that kept me moving, kept me alone. I told myself it was easier that way, safer. No attachments meant no pain." He looked at her directly. "But when I saw you sitting there in that alley, crying and alone, I saw Myra. I saw what could have happened to her if I hadn't been there. And I couldn't. I can't just walk away from that." Nissa's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, a small, fragile thing. "My father used to say that the stars bring people together for a reason, that nothing is truly random." "Maybe he was right," Tarek said softly. They finished their meal, and Tarek showed Nissa to the small sleeping quarters. It was barely more than a bunk with storage underneath, but she looked at it like it was a palace suite. "This is all for me?" she asked. "It's not much, but it's perfect," she interrupted, running her hand over the clean blanket. "At Velora's house, I slept in the storage room on a mat. This is wonderful." Tarek felt anger kindle in his gut again at how low the bar had been set for this child's happiness. A basic bunk seemed like luxury to her. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll be in hyperspace for about 8 hours. Then we need to figure out our next move." As he turned to leave, Nissa called out softly, "Papa?" Tarek froze. She'd said it earlier, in the tunnel, but hearing it again made his throat tight. "Thank you," she continued, "for everything. I promise I'll be good. I won't cause trouble. I'll earn my keep somehow." He looked back at her, this small alien child with glowing marks and too much pain in her eyes. "You don't have to earn anything, Nissa. You're not cargo or a servant. You're just a kid who deserves better than she got." Her smile widened a fraction as she curled up on the bunk, pulling the blanket around herself. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a deep sleep. Tarek returned to the cockpit and sank into his chair, running his hands through his hair. What had he done? He'd just kidnapped No, rescued an alien child, made himself a fugitive, and taken on enemies he didn't fully understand. His quiet, safe, lonely life was thoroughly destroyed. And yet, hearing her call him Papa, seeing her smile. He looked at the small photo he kept stuck to the console edge. Mira, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a drawing of the ringed planet they'd lived near. He'd kept it all these years as both a treasure and a torture. "What do you think, sweetheart?" he whispered to the image. "Did I do the right thing?" The photo, of course, didn't answer. But somehow, Tarek felt a warmth in his chest that hadn't been there for 6 long years. They'd been traveling for 4 days when they reached Meridian's edge, a large orbital station that served as a neutral trading hub. Tarek had chosen it carefully big enough to get lost in, lawless enough that questions weren't asked, but stable enough to have resources they needed. Nissa had spent the journey slowly opening up. She told him about her father's work, about the songs he'd sung, about how he'd taught her to read star charts. She showed Tarek how her marks would pulse in certain patterns, responding to her emotions. When she was calm, they glowed softly. When frightened, they blazed bright. When happy, which was becoming more frequent, they shimmered like sunlight on water. She'd also started calling him Papa without hesitation, and Tarek had stopped correcting her. It felt right, somehow, even though it terrified him. At Meridian's edge, they docked in a less traveled section and headed into the station's commercial district. Tarek kept Nissa close, making sure her marks were hidden under long sleeves. But they needed supplies, and more importantly, they needed information. In the station's medical quarter, Tarek found what he was looking for, a small clinic run by a woman named Jaina, someone he'd met on previous cargo runs. She was human, in her early 30s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for discretion. When they entered, Jaina looked up from her desk and raised an eyebrow. Tarek, didn't expect to see you here. Usually you avoid stations like these. Her gaze moved to Nissa, and her expression softened. And who's this? This is Nissa, Tarek said carefully. I'm looking after her. Jaina's eyes narrowed slightly, reading between the lines. She'd been in the frontier long enough to recognize a complicated situation when she saw one. Come into the back. In the private examination room, Jaina knelt down to Nissa's level. Hello, Nissa. I'm Jaina. Your papa says you might need some medical attention. Nissa glanced at Tarek, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, she rolled up her sleeves, revealing the glowing patterns. Jaina's breath caught. Stars above, she whispered. Those are full celestial inheritance marks. I've never seen them this developed in someone so young. She looked up at Tarek. Do you know what these mean? I was hoping you could tell me, Tarek admitted. Jaina carefully examined the marks, using a scanner to read their patterns. Celestians are an old race, she explained as she worked. Most of their genetic markers have degraded over generations of mixing with other species. But these, she pointed to the intricate patterns on Nissa's arms. These are pure. Ancient bloodline pure. They're not just decorative, they're a genetic lock and key system. A key to what? Tarek asked. That depends on the family line. But typically, something valuable. Property rights, access to sealed archives, territorial claims. The Celestians had a vast empire once, before it fell. Families with marks like these can claim ancestral holdings. Nissa spoke up quietly. My stepmother said they led to the Archive of the Stars. Jaina's head snapped up. The Archive? That's supposed to be a legend. A repository of Celestian genetic records, territorial deeds, and cultural treasures. She looked at Tarek seriously. If that's real, and these marks are the key, then this child is worth more than most planetary economies. Tarek felt his blood run cold. That's why they're hunting her. Not just hunting, Jaina said grimly. Velara probably wants to activate the marks herself, claim whatever inheritance is locked away. But the marks are genetically bonded to Nissa. The only way to transfer them would be death, Tarek finished. Nissa had gone very still, her face pale. Tarek immediately pulled her against his side, protective. Jaina's expression was sympathetic. There's more you should know. These marks are awakening. See how they pulse? That's the beginning of maturation. Within a few months, maybe a year, they'll fully activate and show her the way to whatever they're designed to unlock. Can we hide her? Change her appearance? Tarek asked. The marks can't be surgically removed without killing her. They're integrated into her nervous system. You could try cosmetic covering, but genetic scanners would pick them up instantly. Jaina paused. Your best option is to help her activate the marks yourself, claim whatever inheritance exists, and use that leverage to protect her legally. Or we run, Tarek said. Keep running until when? Jaina interrupted gently. Tarek, I can see what she means to you. I can see you care. But running isn't a life for a child. Before Tarek could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed. A voice came over the intercom. Security alert. Unauthorized armed individuals on level 7. All civilians shelter in place. Tarek's heart sank. Level 7 was where they were. Jaina moved quickly, hitting a panel that sealed the clinic doors. Back exit, she said, pointing. Through the storage room. It connects to the maintenance corridors. Jaina, Tarek started. Go, she said firmly. I'll tell them I haven't seen anyone matching your description. Then, softer, to Nissa. Take care of your papa, sweetheart. He needs you as much as you need him. Nissa nodded, clutching Tarek's hand tightly. They ran through the storage room and into the maintenance corridors, the sounds of shouting and heavy boots echoing behind them. But as they turned a corner, they came face to face with a holographic projection that flickered to life in front of them. It was a Celestian woman, beautiful and cold, with elaborate jewelry and clothes that spoke of wealth. Her eyes fixed on Nissa with calculation, not love. "There you are, stepdaughter," Belora's voice echoed through the corridor. "Running away with this human. How disappointing. You could have made this easy." "You abandoned me," Nissa said, her voice shaking but defiant. "You left me to die." "I left you to activate your marks through stress," Belora corrected coolly. "Death was always a backup option. The archive is mine by marriage right. Those marks should have been given to me when your father died, but the stubborn fool bonded them to you instead." Her gaze shifted to Tarek. "Human, you're interfering in Celestian family matters. Return the child, and I'll see you're compensated for your trouble." "She's not cargo to be returned," Tarek said coldly. Velora's smile was predatory. "Then you're an accomplice to kidnapping. I have legal guardianship. The authorities will see you prosecuted." "You threw her away," Tarek shot back. "You left her with 20 credits at a trading post. That's abandonment." "Prove it," Velora said simply. "It's my word against yours. And I have wealth, connections, lawyers. What do you have? An aging cargo ship and misplaced sympathy?" The hologram flickered out, but her laughter echoed in the corridor. Tarek, and Nissa ran harder, reaching his ship just as station security appeared at the far end of the dock. Tarek fired up the engines, pulling away from Meridian's edge with barely enough clearance. Warning shots flashing past the hull. As they jumped to hyperspace once more. Nissa was crying quietly in the co-pilot's seat. Tarek reached over and took her hand. "I won't let her take you," he said firmly. "But she's right," Nissa sobbed. "She has everything. Papers that say I'm hers. Money for lawyers. What do we have?" Tarek squeezed her hand. "We have each other. And sometimes that's enough." He didn't know if he believed that. But looking at this brave, broken child, who'd somehow become his daughter in the span of a few days, he knew he'd fight with everything he had to make it true. "Where do we go now?" Nissa asked, wiping her tears. Tarek looked at the star charts, then at the faint glow of her marks. "You said these marks are a map. Let's find out where they lead. If that archive exists, if it can protect you legally, then that's where we need to go." Nissa's eyes widened. "But that's what Velora wants. The difference is, the archive is yours by blood, not hers. If we get there first, if we claim your inheritance properly, then she has no legal standing." He smiled slightly. "We just have to beat a wealthy, connected noblewoman, with hired hunters to a legendary location that no one's found in centuries. Easy. Despite everything." Nissa laughed, a small, genuine sound that made Tarek's heart lift. "Papa?" She said softly. "Yes?" "I'm glad the stars brought us together." Tarek felt his eyes burn with unexpected tears. "Me too, little star. Me too." As the wandering star flew through the void, carrying a cargo pilot who'd found a reason to stop running and a child who'd finally found someone who wouldn't abandon her. The marks on Nissa's arms began to pulse in a new pattern, a rhythm that matched the stars themselves, guiding them toward a destiny neither had asked for, but both would face together.